Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and this time we're talking about my thoughts on the ending for Pokémon Scarlet, or if you played Pokémon Violet, would probably also apply for Violet as well. So yes, there will be spoilers in this video, and yes, I did tear up at the end because I felt that the game was terrible, and it just ruined my... No, I'm just kidding. The game, yes, it's had its issues, but the ending I actually felt was very good, and in an emotional way, and I felt that it actually completed the game very strongly, and it left a lasting impact on me. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about my experience with Pokémon Scarlet through and through, from beginning to end. I finished it last weekend, and I'm only just now kind of getting around to talking about it. About a bit of a time crunch here, so the editing might be a bit more on the simpler side. But yes, I want to talk about Pokémon Scarlet and how the ending did actually leave me feeling kind of emotional. It was pretty powerful for me. So that's what we're talking about today. But before we jump into things, let me very briefly mention my social media. You may see a few different things here on the screen. You can check that all out. It's linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you may subscribe or perhaps consider joining as a member. So first, let's address the terrible joke, because it's rooted in truth. There were times where my immersion in Pokémon Scarlet were impacted by the common frame rate issues and glitches. They are rampant throughout, even with the most recent update, which doesn't seem to have impacted too much. The biggest thing, which I talked about here on the channel with one of those shorts and things, is just that Pokemon that were sleeping in battle were not actually sleeping in battle until after the update, which I'm glad they fixed, and it definitely helped my immersion, but I was already more than halfway through the game at that point. So the fact that there were issues like that and just random glitches and things like that, that definitely took away from my experience. But going into Pokemon, what I was hoping to get out of it was for it to be an escape for me to take some time at the end of every day or most days and just play for a little bit, escape from the rest of reality and have a good time and feel good while playing it. And while there were issues, and at times I felt I couldn't fully immerse myself into the experience because of those issues, for the most part, I still feel that the game was able to keep me engaged throughout most of the experience, keep me immersed, and be that escape that I was looking forward to playing all throughout this year. It did that. Despite its issues, it could have been better, but it still did that. And the three different main quests you do throughout the game, the Gym Leader Challenge, the battling of Team Star, and then doing the Titan fight battles with the different characters, I liked how they handled that because it allowed you to explore the game in an open way and do things out of order, which I all appreciated. And because of how I chose to play the game, going to different areas at different times to make the game more challenging for me, it was fun, and I will say that I experienced more challenge with this Pokemon game than I've had with previous Pokemon games, and I think that says a lot. I still feel like there's a lot of room for growth because they could have done all this and also had a scalable difficulty. Maybe every few badges you get, they raise up all the other trainers by a tier or two, and they do that a few times throughout the game. That way it keeps things challenging and you don't just run into a gym leader where you have Pokemon in the 70s or 60s and they have theirs in the 20s or 30s, because that's not even fun for me. That's just busy work at that point. So I think there's definitely room for improvement. The towns for sure could have been improved. I liked the theming of the towns. I just thought there could be more to them beyond just restaurants and the gym battles. Like, most of the buildings you can't even go into, which is just weird because previous games you could. That all said, once I got through the three main quests and I unlocked the final quest in the game, things picked up. At that point, the game becomes less open and more linear if you choose to progress the story, but it's more than arguably one of the best parts of the game. It does an incredible job as you delve deeper and deeper into the crater of Paldea to reach the professor. There is this dynamic that engages that I found to be quite refreshing for the Pokemon series. So you're running around this new open-ish environment and you're exploring, and the technical issues still persist even in this area in the crater. But it's interesting because you're seeing some more Pokemon, a little bit more rare. The environment is a cool looking environment. It's different from everything else, and as you get deeper, it does change. But there's also this looming threat that they're building up as you're going from one lab to another, delving deeper and deeper into the crater. but also you have your friends, your companions, your team, and they're running alongside of you. So there's actually 3 computers, non-playable characters running alongside of you as you delve deeper into the crater, which I felt was a pretty cool little dynamic. You don't normally see that in a lot of games, especially for something like Pokemon, so that felt like something a little bit more advanced than what I have come to expect from the Pokemon games. So that was really cool, and I appreciated how they were sort of telling a story as they kind of talked and walked with you as you delved deeper and deeper. And there were some cool beats with each particular character and their arcs, which I appreciated. So they were telling a decent story here. The most significant one is with Arven, of course, because that's where most of the stakes lie, because he is the son of the professor, regardless of which version you're playing. But you're learning a little bit more about the situation as you progress deeper, and things become increasingly more daunting and creepy, which I really appreciated, and it's something you may not expect with a Pokemon game, but it definitely adds to the overall experience. But I think part of the value in seeing these interactions late game is because you do see the interactions you have with yourself and the 3 different main characters, Penny, Nemona, and Arven, because you have individual quests with them, but then they all start to interact with each other in this end part with you, and you start to build up a friend dynamic between the 4 of you, which is cool and it's fun. But again, going back to that darker element, once we get deeper and deeper, and again, this is obviously spoilers. I felt like that was pretty obvious from the get-go with the title, but in case you weren't aware, there will be spoilers here, so you have been warned. But once you finally get to the professor, you deal with all these powerful Pokemon, and there's this weird issue going on with your Koraidon and scared of this other Koraidon that's down there, and that's all an interesting dynamic. You finally get to the professor, and it turns out, as it was somewhat suggested not too long ago into this final quest, that she, or he, is not who we thought they were. They are no longer the professor, they are simply an AI. But what I didn't expect, the curveball, was that the professor had passed away. Now, if this was like a typical Hollywood movie or a book or something, I might have seen that coming. But to see that in a Pokemon game, which in general we sort of look at as being geared towards children, yes, it's family friendly and there are elements that can be appreciated by older people like myself, I wouldn't have expected the story to have gone that dark, because one of your friends, one of the characters you travel alongside the entire time, who's had issues with their parent throughout the entire story, we weren't sure why the parent wasn't treating Arven well, like an actual son. And as it turns out, the reason is because, well, they actually died years ago, and what we've seen is just an AI that's pretending to be them all this time. So it's kind of like a little dark plot point that I didn't see coming, but it made it increasingly more impactful because of Arven. Arven, we were worried about how he was feeling, how he was handling things. Not to mention that you spent a great deal of the game helping to revive Mabosstief, which is this dog-like Pokemon that I was kind of worried was gonna die because it looked just like an old dog, and I've personally had an old dog before and I've seen them pass away, so it hits you in a particular way with the feelings. Of course, the dog is fine, but there's a little bit of that threat, and then the threat evolves into, oh wait, Arven's mother is not alive, and you become worried about how he's gonna react to the news of this AI. But then that all happens, and then things become increasingly more epic as you get into the final stage of the battle, and the AI has to protect the initial vision for the professor, which was to kind of maintain this sort of time balance machine thing. I'm sure it's a little different when Violet, but basically there is this thing going on that's a time machine that brings in powerful Pokemon from a different time, and you have to battle it, and it's really cool because you're fighting all these different Paradox Pokemon, and there's this epic set piece that I really appreciate. I felt like they went the extra mile with the final battle this time around. And then when it ends, you think it's over, but of course, you know it's not really, because there's still the whole plot point of Koraidon and Miraidon fighting its counterpart that won in the territorial battle that's kind of left it emotionally scarred. But you're stuck in this moment because you can't use any of your Pokemon. Something else I don't think we've really seen before from a previous Pokemon game, where you're not allowed to use any of your balls. Like, you can't release any of your Pokemon, so there's this threat. You're locked down deep in this crater filled with so many dangerous things, and this AI that its sole objective is to protect the time machine. So you feel trapped, and naturally the only thing you can do is use Koraidon, because Koraidon's ball actually has the ID of the initial professor, the only person who had access in that realm. So this moment comes, and it's a powerful moment as well, because Koraidon, you see, was suffering. It was unable to battle throughout the entire experience of the game, but you helped revive it physically, but mentally it had this scar. You saw it whimpering against the other Koraidon earlier on, and yet here we are, you're actually battling this other Koraidon, or Miraidon if it's Violet again. But what was cool about this experience is that I also wasn't entirely sure how they were going to handle this. Now, it's clear after having gone through it that it was probably mostly scripted, but I still felt like there was this threat of losing, because I didn't have any other options, and my Koraidon had no chance against this other Koraidon. Like, I was hitting it, it was doing very little, it was doing a lot to me. But the way the game builds up, and you see your friends cheering for Koraidon, it creates this sort of sense of arousing effort, and Koraidon is leveling up as the battle's going on. All its stages are rising, it's getting stronger, it's amping up, and it's doing its very best to beat this more powerful Pokemon. So it's an underdog story here, while also showing this effort to kind of push past its emotional scars in this very dangerous environment where the stakes are higher than they ever have been for a Pokemon game, from what I can I mean, there's been other times where they've been pretty high, but it felt the stakes were higher here because the way they set things up. And just to see the Koraidon triumph, especially at the end when you go ahead and you go for the terastallization to hit it for a super effective dragon attack at that right perfect opportune moment when you're left with 1 HP, thinking you have no chance at all, that's really cool. I definitely was not entirely sure if I was going to be able to beat this thing. I figured I had to ultimately, because there was just no way that I would have been able to do it without just using an insane amount of potions and stuff. I chose not to do that because I wanted to keep the game challenging for me. But the point is, even though it was probably scripted, the game did a great job of selling this moment with high stakes, and it was very impactful. It was a nice climactic end to the story, and seeing, you know, that emotional send-off with the professor and Arven no longer having any sort of contact with his mother because she's dead, or even this AI that was being a proxy for her, there was sort of that emotional beat as well. But at the end, as the friends are heading back together, they decide to go on a longer detour, and seeing that whole moment and how ultimately the implication was that the treasure you were looking for throughout the entire course of the game was the friends you made along the way, which maybe seemed like kind of a corny ending, but in the context of the situation, of the build-up throughout that final main quest of the game, where you see all these characters that you got to know throughout the other parts of the game, interacting with each other, with the stakes rising, with the creepy atmosphere getting deeper and deeper into the crater, with the big sort of news that, the revelation I should say, of Arven's mother actually being dead, with Koraidon having that final epic battle and beating this other more powerful Koraidon, when you realize you wouldn't be able to do it unless it would have been some sort of plot armor, which is absolutely what it was, but still, they created a very powerful experience, and it left me choked up a little bit a few different times, seeing how Koraidon was able to push past its own emotional scars, seeing Arven being able to handle the loss of his mother there in these high stakes like situations, and seeing everyone sort of getting along with each other and being like a new sort of strong group of friends that travel together, I guess Arven's new family. That was all pretty impactful and not something I quite expected for a Pokemon game. And yes, I teared up a little bit. I was a little emotional about it. I thought it was a very powerful end to this game that, yes, was marred by a number of frame rate and glitch issues. It was annoying, but ultimately, especially with how things closed, I found that my experience for Pokemon Scarlet was a very good one, and I do hope in the future they fix these issues, but there's definitely some things that we're doing really right here with the story, with how you explore the world, with the characters. It was pretty good. It was epic, and I had a really good time with it. So yeah, Pokemon Scarlet, not so bad. Definitely there are issues throughout the main part of the game with all the performance issues, but still a fun game, and it was still a pretty nice escape for me. But those are my thoughts on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. What did you guys make of the end? Did you have a similar experience to me? Did you hate it? Did you love it even more? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching. and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.